Okay, hello, welcome. Open up chapter 11, PowerPoint, Global Location Decisions. We're going to start there. So if you start on slide 4, and it talks about facility location is very important to how well the company performs overall. So if you think about the fact that if you stock things close to where the customer will want them, so in that Amazon model where Prime has things that they think people will order often available in a big warehouse in Houston. It's not so they can get them to you in 2 hours or 4 hours. They don't have to get them to you in 2 days because they're coming from, say, Chicago, Memphis. They don't have to get on an airplane, that kind of thing. So this is what this entire chapter is going to talk about, is globally how you assess where your usage is and how you use that planning information to stock at the location that makes the most sense. So to reduce transportation time to the customer, but also to be efficient so that you don't have 4,000 warehouses that all have 2 things in them. So let's talk about on slide 6, we talk about an offshore factory. Now, so these are on your test. You need to know what each one of these is. An offshore factory gives you the advantage of having low cost and low labor. So the people driving the forklifts, unloading the trucks, keeping track of all the paperwork, doing all that are generally a lower cost at an offshore factory. A source factory, you can read here, but that means that the plant, people that work in that plant are helping you choose your selection of suppliers. So they know the local suppliers, and they're working on helping the production schedule. So making that master production schedule, figuring out capacity, those kinds of things. A server factory, so this is not a server like a computer server or a network server. Means that this factory serves the business by using incentives that governments may make available. So a city or a country may say, if you open a facility here, we will waive your property taxes for a certain period of time, or things like that. A contributor factory is, I didn't put that on your test, but just so you know, that means that the company is involved in developing new products, making sure that the production schedule makes sense, what suppliers we're going to use, what suppliers we don't have or we need more of that we need to be developing, etc. I don't think I put outpost or lead factory on your exam, but you can read those. If you go to slide 7, this is just a little chart that shows you some ways that you can make some decisions about where factories should be. If you move on to slide 8, you can look at, this is information about the regional trade agreements and the World Trade Organization. 159 members is a fluid number, but the World Trade Organization, I think had a case about this as well. The World Trade Organization is generally a non-country specific organization that's making global agreements and global standards around what trade should look like and how trade should be conducted between different countries. So you have a complete explanation of the WTO on slide 9. I gave you, I think, 1 or 2 of these that are on slide 10, but just so you know, NAFTA, we talked about that in the last chapter. NAFTA is being replaced currently. We are working through that, very close to signing a new agreement with Canada and Mexico. But Mercosur is a organization, or not an organization, an agreement between Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Venezuela. And that basically lets them have a similar agreement to NAFTA, where the tariffs between those countries are either non-existent or extremely low. The Association of Southeastern Asian Nations, or they call that the ASEAN Agreement, or COMESA, they're very similar. And all they're intended to do is increase trade between those countries by reducing or eliminating tariffs on most goods. Okay, if you look at slide 12, there are 4 competitiveness factors that you should understand what those mean. There is a chart on 13 that just talks about competitiveness rankings. This is a little bit out of date because this book is about 5 years old, but you can just take a look there. And if we go to slide 14, you can look at the 12 pillars of competitiveness. So one of the things that you should be aware of here, number 2, is infrastructure. So infrastructure means things like roads, hospitals, availability of internet now, things like that. So I did my study abroad when I did my master's degree in India. And one of the things that I found very odd is that our hotel would run out of hot water every day. And I couldn't really understand what that meant, but there was not a infrastructure of sewer or pipe or water pipe to get water to the hotel. So they had a giant container in the back of the hotel. It was brought by truck every day, filled with water. And when that water was gone, there was no more hot water. So those kinds of things will limit the ability, and that's in Bangalore, huge city, millions of people live there. So that kind of infrastructure not existing, or roads not existing, government not existing, things like that will definitely make a difference. We're seeing during this time of COVID, think if you were trying to do distance learning and you were living somewhere where you didn't have easy access to the internet. You didn't have the ability to carry a cell phone that could connect to almost anything. So those kinds of competitiveness are very important in choosing a global location. You don't want to choose a location for a factory where it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars a month to have the internet access that you need, because you're going to have to get it from a satellite or something like that. You want to make sure all of these things are there, that there's healthcare, that there's education, that you're in a big enough market. You're not opening it in a small, isolated city where it's going to be hard to have access to labor, etc. Government taxes and incentives. This is going to change on slide 15 every single time. We talked in chapter 10 about free trade zones and how those work. But if you also look now on slide 16, currency stability is a big thing. You don't want to negotiate a contract to pay workers a certain amount of money in another country and then realize that the currency exchange has drastically changed, and now you're paying more money than you had intended or budgeted for, things like that. You can read through on slide 17 and slide 18, just more information. And then on slide 19, I did put this on your test, some quality of life issues. Just read through those and make sure you understand. Many of you that live in Houston would not want to live in a small town, perhaps where you didn't have any ability to go to college, or you didn't have any ability to go see a play or go have any kind of theater, things like that, or if you live somewhere that was very polluted. So just read through those. You're going to need to know a few of those for your exam. Right to work laws on slide 20. Most people have either a union environment or a right to work environment. So union environment would be that if you wanted to work in certain fields, you are most of the time obligated to join a union. Or right to work basically says you don't have to join a union and you can work in a city or in a field, like you can be a plumber or things like that, without having to join that union. So we've done these scorecards. I'm looking at slide 21 and 22. We've done these scorecards. You understand how they work. You put a weight on each one of those factors. You score each country, and then you will get a weighted number that gives you an idea of whether that is a good place or not. You can look at slide 23 about the break-even model to figure out how much is it going to cost me to buy a new facility, train all the people, hire all the people, etc. And then how much money is it going to save me to have that facility? At what point do I start making money? Where do I break even? So it's going to cost me $100 million to set something up new, but I'm going to save $200 million within the first 18 months. Then my break even point is somewhere between like 9 and 12 months. This is more information on slide 24 about the break-even model and a chart on slide 25. This is math on slide 26 and 27, 28, so you don't need to look at those. Don't worry about those. There is some helpful information on slide 30 about if you were actually doing this in your job, some ways to get some help. And then the last thing, and this is on your test on slide 31, is about business clusters. So many of you are probably aware that in Detroit, there are a lot of automakers, and then there are also a lot of suppliers who serve the automakers. That's become a business cluster. People talk about Silicon Valley in California. People call Austin, Texas, the mini Texas Silicon Valley. A lot of companies that do high tech have developed a supplier base there, and then they've got a big pool of talent that they can pull from as well. On slide 32, we have our obligatory green slide about sustainable development and green development, so you can read about that. And then the last thing on slide 33 in this chapter, you'll hear the term additive manufacturing. People do call it that, but more often you'll hear it referred to as 3D printing. Most of you probably have seen something that has been 3D printed, but the advantage in the supply chain here is that if you need one of something or 5 of something, rather than asking your supplier to tool up, set up, run that part, and then break that setup down and ship you the part, if you can 3D print that part and have it be just as good, it's a much shorter lead time, and it allows you to customize the part. So if you want this one for customer A, but customer B needs almost the same thing, but with a slight change to it, you can make that change easily in a 3D printing environment. So it gives you some other benefits there in that second bullet. There's also become a new industry of, much like if you wanted to print 10,000 of something, you wouldn't try to copy those on your office copier or on a Kinko's copier. You would go and hire, hey, I'm going to take this job and let Kinko's, FedEx, somebody run it, a printer run it. There have become service bureaus that will do 3D printing for you as well, and they have much higher tech equipment and much faster equipment, so they're able to do it more quickly for businesses. So this is a good summary of chapter 11. You can take a look at your study guide and begin filling that in so that you're prepared for the test. And we will move on in just a moment to chapter 12.